Greetings everyone, Sanbonani, Dumelang. Welcome to episode 4 of the Politics of You and Me. Thank you for joining for all of these last few weeks, and welcome to yet another episode where we have bold conversations and inspire real solutions. You are joined today by Mpho Nyamathe, your host. I am an intersectional activist with big research interests in climate action, environmental justice, gender equality, equity, and bridging the gap in terms of systemic inequalities. And the purpose of this platform is to really encourage everyone who's listening that we cannot address problems in isolation. And with that, I would like to formally introduce my podcast to you. And with this podcast, I aim to show you all that politics is ingrained in every aspect of our lives, from the digital divide to gender-based violence, from environmental injustice to the education crisis. Every issue shapes the way we live, work, and exist. As such, this podcast unpacks the lived realities of South Africans, amplifying voices often left unheard. This is a hub to engage and challenge while learning about current affairs in South Africa and beyond. Guided by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as per Agenda 2030, this is a platform to generate impact through dialogue. And we're going to just quickly go through the SDGs and just have an overview. So the Sustainable Development Goals is basically a plan of action for people, planet, prosperity. It seeks to strengthen universal peace and recognize, things like extreme poverty as a large driver of inequality, right? It acknowledges that we as human beings are entitled to freedoms that are free from the tyranny of poverty, as well as just a need to be free from all forms of injustice, all forms of inequality, all forms of discrimination, right? And the SDGs do a brilliant job of acknowledging the growing rate of climate change and acknowledging as well the need for more sustainable solutions and inclusive economic growth, right? Especially when looking at how our world is changing so quickly, so rapidly, right? And with that, we're going to be looking specifically under the context of this episode titled Justice for Cwecwe. We're going to be looking at SDG 16, which is the creation of peaceful and inclusive society, specifically under the lens of violence against children, right? And with that, we're just going to be digging into the importance of ensuring that young people are protected and are free from fear, neglect, abuse, and exploitation, right? As per the UN Conventions of the Right of the Child, right? The Agenda 2030 seeks to end all forms of violence against children and gives a renewed sense of momentum to ensure that young people are, specifically children, are free from all forms of violence and oppression, right? And it also acknowledges under Agenda 2030 SDG 16 that with young people, it's really important that they are kept safe, specifically with regards to the environment that they're in, because a lot of the time their institutions drive a lot of the forms of violence and oppression that they experience, right? So before we dig into this week's episode titled Justice for Cwecwe, we're going to be doing a quick recap from the previous episode. When looking at a research article, or rather a website article presented by Ground Up. This is a South African non-profit news agency that publishes human rights-focused public interest journalism, right? And specifically last week, we were looking at observing Human Rights Day in South Africa, right? And with that, it gave us a really brilliant opportunity to look at Sharpeville in the past versus Sharpeville today. Human Rights Day is otherwise associated and symbolized in accordance with the Sharpeville massacre, where we had people fighting for their rights, Black individuals fighting for their rights and fighting against the past laws. This was a peaceful march to the police station in Sharpeville, and it ended up being a bloodbath of people who are merely seeking for better rights in an oppressive political climate, being met with so much resistance, so much violence, so much blood and death, right? And with that, it's really important to, consider the history of where we come from in terms of the Sharpeville massacre, how the Constitution, the highest law of the land, was signed on Sharpeville, particularly at the police station, and specifically where we're at today in terms of our political context. When we look at the old police station, it is now symbolized, as a place of hope. Every Human Rights Day, we have politicians coming in from different corners of our country to pay homage to the same place in which the Constitution was signed into law, right? However, when we look at the lived realities of people living in Sharpeville today, they will tell you that they're actually quite tired of the parades, and that Human Rights Day is really the only time where there's service delivery in the area. In fact, a lot of the people living in Sharpeville will tell you that they are often overlooked by government, right? And that the money spent on these yearly parades could actually be spent on improving the township. And a key topic point from last week is just that the regions that struggled with systemic inequalities, with the spatial divides as per the Housing Act, places that were experiencing those kinds of institutionalized forms of oppression, they are still being oppressed in this day and age. They are experiencing a myriad of inequalities that have not been reconciled, and this once again echoes the need for us to redress apartheid town planning, to reconcile it, to fix the issue, so that people who experienced generational poverty and spatial divides of the past, that they experience a life that is filled with freedom. There are so many individuals, so many stories of people who are living a life that is not so different from the one that we used to live during apartheid. And with that, I feel like the previous episode really spoke to STG 10, which is the need to reduce inequalities, specifically acknowledging the fact that a lot of the inequalities that we experience in modern day South Africa are linked to our painful history under apartheid, under a regime that ensured that people, Black individuals, colored individuals, Indian individuals, they were not given full rights to travel to their fullest extent, with most who are suffering being Black people in townships, right? And it's important for us to address those inequalities, because in a world that is changing with climate change, with technological and digital innovation, we have so many people being left behind, and already people don't have basics. People don't have access to water, electricity, food. And now more than ever is the time for us to stand up and to be really inclusive about how we develop policies in ensuring that they represent all South Africans, the average South Africans, from all corners, instead of just representing an elite that benefits from a system that keeps them fed. And I want us to reflect on that. And with that, we spent the last 10 minutes introducing the topic, introducing last week's topic. And with that, I would love to dig into this week's episode titled Justice for Cwecwe. Now, this episode comes about following the outrage, but also the pain that I carry as well as an intersectional activist, learning about the tragic case of a 7-year-old young girl, Cwecwe, She is a 7-year-old child from Matatiele, and she was allegedly raped while under the care of Bergview College. And despite there being medical confirmation of this assault, no arrests were made. And I think a key area of public contention here is that the principal of the school refused testing that would otherwise clear him as one of the potential perpetrators in this case. And this is a very deeply troubling case because South Africa is known to be a rape capital. It is known to be a very dangerous place to exist as a woman because sexual assault is something that happens on a daily. It was recorded in 2018 that about one woman is raped every 12 minutes. And this was back in the Q3 of 2023, with about 5,578 women murdered as well within the same year. And it's really important for us to really hold space for the epidemic that gender-based violence is. It doesn't stop with our women. In fact, it starts with our children. And with that, I just also want to echo my concern for the lack of implementation on the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence. It was in 2018 when government departments rallied around the plan, putting together about 1.6 billion being sourced through budget prioritization, and it also listed, key interventions to be implemented over the next 6 months, right? And I'm going to read through these so that we can evaluate them in accordance to what our country is going through and the crisis that is gender-based violence. For starters, the National Strategic Plan, it says that it seeks to urgently respond to victims and survivors of gender-based violence, and to broaden access to justice for survivors, to change social norms and behaviors through high-level awareness raising and prevention campaigns, to strengthen existing architecture and promote accountability, as well as the creation of more economic opportunities for women who are vulnerable to abuse due to poverty. And we have Pillar 1, which is specifically on accountability, and it seeks to bolden leadership, or rather to have leadership that is bold, that is strengthened accountability across government and society, and that responds to gender-based violence strategically with clear messaging and adequate technical and financial resources, right? And this National Strategic Plan specifically also has a focus on violence against children, as they experience a lot of gender-based violence, especially within areas that they're meant to be safe. I mean, look at the case with 7-year-old Cwecwe, right? And looking at all of these tenets and these pillars that need to be achieved within the next few months, we can already see that we failed, right? Because how is it that we have a call, or rather a target, to respond to victims and survivors of gender-based violence? Where is the adequate response for Cwecwe, who deserves justice and who deserves to really have her voice heard in terms of all of these procedures being followed accordingly, right? And where is our sense of agency as a country in terms of strengthening our existing architecture and providing accountability, when the principal of the school can easily deny being tested in a situation where one of the school children, Cwecwe, a 7-year-old girl, was sexually assaulted? Then surely that means that we have failed in terms of the objectives of the National Strategic Plan, because those who are in power are still able to get away with gender-based violence. Those who are in power are still able to sexually assault young children and get away with it, to the extent of even removing the child out of school for having experienced sexual assault. And I really want us to hold space for the severity of this issue and the work that needs to be done by our government officials, by the leaders of this country in implementing the National Strategic Plan, in making sure that our country is safe. And with that, I really want to pose a very heavy question to everyone who may be listening right now. When we consider the cases of gender-based violence in different places, for example, starting subject being Cwecwe, a 7-year-old girl being sexually assaulted at school, where can women, children, and queer individuals go for safety if they are prone to sexual assault in schools? When considering the number of sexual assault cases taking place in police stations, I beg to ask the same question. Where does one go for safety when the very same people who are responsible and who are tasked with, protecting everyone in the country, when they are the same people who perpetuate these inequalities and who use their positions of power to impede on the social well-being of women, children, and queer individuals? And when we look at as well Mpho Nyamathe, who was raped and murdered at a post office, and the man responsible for her death attacked, raped, and murdered the then first-year humanities student. And that's really where we ask ourselves, where are women truly safe? Definitely not in a post office. Where are queer people safe? Definitely not in a police station. Where are our children safe? Definitely not in the schools. So what do? How do we exist? And this is really how we see that politics is truly ingrained in the way that we live, work, and choose to exist. Because the truth is, the people who could be really fast-tracking these processes and implementing them are sitting back and watching us demand for justice, are sitting back and watching us sign petitions begging for young people like Cwecwe to have their voices heard in such situations, and for young children like Cwecwe to be protected from such horrible circumstances, right? And horrible situations. And with that, I also call upon our leaders to ensure that these places, these public spaces, are safe for women, children, and queer individuals, because it's becoming a disturbing trend now where young people, where women, where children, and queer individuals are not safe in any places, especially also when we consider taxi ranks as well, and the lack of safety there, and the many cases of sexual assault there as well, right? And with that, I want to open to the next part of the discussion, right? And as this case is really fueled by a lot of outrage by young people, rightfully so, because things are not changing. We had the National Strategic Plan in 2018, and very little has changed from the time it has been implemented. In fact, we're seeing more cases and crazier cases of sexual assault, of gender-based violence. Just a couple of weeks ago, I remember coming across a case of a man who raped his 8-year-old daughter, I believe in retaliation for crime. And this is how we see that we need an urgent redress of social norms, particularly among men, because men are the drivers of the pain and the hurt experienced by women, children, and queer individuals, particularly and especially within the context of gender-based violence. And with that, I would like to take us to the next point of our discussion, where we hear from young people, as this is a case that is really, really, supported by the public and has caught the eye of the public, of people living in South Africa. I've managed to gauge a couple of responses from young people who really want to see change in their country, change with regards to how gender-based violence is being addressed in our country. So I'm going to be reading a couple of these responses, and just so we can get a sense of what young people are saying and thinking. Our first response is from Mpho Malunga. This individual is 22 years old from Port Shepstone, and their response is, one of the key changes that are necessary in our country is faster and more effective justice. The current system must ensure that cases of gender-based violence are prioritized, investigated thoroughly, and prosecuted efficiently to bring perpetrators to justice. Together, we can create a safer society for all. Thank you so much, Mpho, for these remarks. And I think that this is so true and so important. I mean, when looking at Cwecwe's case, it is clear that the investigation definitely needs to be more thorough to ensure that everyone who is present or who was present at the time of the sexual assault taking place, that they investigated and that they are vetted out accordingly. But we can't have a young person speaking out against rape, a child speaking out against rape, and measures not being taken accordingly. And in an instance like that, an authority figure, such as a principal, cannot remove themselves from the investigation where something as simple as a DNA swab would actually provide great insights as to us knowing what actually happened. So thank you so much, Mpho. And then our next response is from Mpho Nyamathe, and this individual is 19 years old. They stay in Johannesburg. And the change they would like to see is workshops in schools and workplaces that specifically teach about gender-based violence. And this individual also suggests that the perpetrators are blacklisted by the government as a response to protecting women and children. And with that, they also call for the government to change their laws on the punishment for perpetrators by ensuring that if they are sexually assaulted by another person, they could get chemical castration for both male and female cases. And I think that with this, Mpho, thank you so much. It's really important for us to really, really get action-orientated solutions. It's not enough for us to keep talking about gender-based violence. We need solutions that promote the protection of women, children, as well as queer individuals in the fight against gender-based violence. And it's true, we need to really, really have, an effective response that is ingrained in our legislation, ingrained in how we do things, in terms of just making sure that people are well educated and are able to stand up for themselves and to claim their rights in the fight of gender-based violence, right? Something as simple as also having workshops in schools and workplaces that contributes significantly to changing and challenging social norms that promote toxic masculinity. I mean, when I think back to when I was a sociology major back in my time at the University of Johannesburg, when I was also majoring in politics and international relations, we got to interact with a couple of individuals, the Widows of Marikana, as well as a couple of key stakeholder groups. And we were able to have a conversation about the importance of, conversations in the township spaces with regards to gender equality, right? And the sharing of stories as to how to better treat our women. Something like that has, proven to be so effective in terms of making sure that we account for the lived realities of all South Africans. And I think that would be a great place to start, right? And then our last response is from Kimberly Sithandwenkosi Mabuza. This individual is 21 years old and they stay in Johannesburg. And their response to what they would like to see changing in our society with regards to how we address gender-based violence is that they are tired of looking at the mirror twice before leaving the house, just because they don't want to unwillingly invite unpleasant males who want to do as they please with their body, irregardless of how this person feels. For the first time, this individual wants to see our country hear us and not turn a blind eye towards our pain and ignore our cries for help. With that, this individual calls for justice to be actually practical and not just a concept or a word we learn in life orientation. And honestly, this is so true. Thank you so much, Kimberly. This reflects the state of our country in the sense that things are not changing. We've had the National Strategic Plan for 2018. There's more and more disturbing cases of gender-based violence among women, but especially lately children. And with that, it's important that we really have, change, real change, because it has emerged as a really huge problem. Leaving the house as a South African woman is very difficult. Leaving the house as well as a queer presenting individual as well, very difficult, because you don't know what kind of energy you're going to be met with, and what kind of invitations you'll be met with that would probably make you feel uncomfortable. And this is a lived reality for many of us. And with that, many of us have stories. Something as simple as going to the store can result in you coming back with a story about how a man was treating you in a way that made you feel uncomfortable. Those are the realities of average South Africans, and it is important for us to make space for that and to, counter a lot of the inequalities that we experience, that we witness with justice, with us also exercising our agency as young leaders, as the voices of impact, as change makers, as policy makers. And I encourage us all to do that. Now, in the spirit of closing off this conversation and ensuring that we have bold conversations that inspire real solutions, I really want to encourage us all to do the following. The first, I would like to encourage us all to start off by signing the petition for Cwecwe's case to be taken seriously, so that we can have various forms of accountability that ensure that justice is served, and that ensure that people in power do not hide behind their power and submit to testing that would otherwise, speak to the case. If you are a suspect, and if it is within due procedure of ensuring that people are cleared out in a certain way, that must be followed without any sense of reservation, without any sense of reluctance, especially when the safety of a young person, especially when the safety of a young girl is at risk and is a discussion point as well, right? So I'm going to be attaching the link to the bio in my episode, and I encourage you all to sign it. And the second form of advice I'd love to give to everyone staying in South Africa, or rather a form of guidance, is let's mobilize and let's really, really come together. There is going to be a peaceful march taking place on the 11th of April, and we're going to be heading to the Union buildings in Pretoria, and this is more details can be found on the Women for Change page on Instagram. And I encourage us all, young people, community leaders, civil society organizations, to mobilize, to pull up for Cwecwe, to pull up for the young children, to pull up for women, to pull up for queer individuals, to pull up for every single person who has a story, to pull up for people who are often unheard in the fight against gender-based violence, to pull up for people who want to be heard in an era that prioritizes people in power. I want us to show up in numbers, because that is one of the many, many, many ways we can generate impact. That is one of the many ways we can really, really stand together against what is now and what has always been an epidemic with regards to gender-based violence. This was a very, very tough topic, but a very important conversation to be had. And with that, I really, really encourage us to take the steps and to really, really challenge the problems that we experience in the society, because they affect how we exist, especially if you are coming from an underserved community, especially if you come from an impoverished background, and especially if you are prone to inequalities because of your gender as well. It's very important that we hold space for that and that we actively mitigate against those realities. So with that, I encourage you all to take a stand against gender-based violence, to mobilize and to attend the peaceful protest taking place at the Union buildings. It's going to be impactful. It's going to be all of us coming together to show up for the people who deserve it most. And with that, I hope you guys have a really, really great start to the next coming week. Do tune in. Next Sunday, we're going to be having yet another exciting episode. But with that, I want to love and leave you. Love and light. Thank you for being with me. I'm signing out. Thank you. Peace out.